Hello YouTube, my name is Jack and welcome back to another Daemons video. And today we're going to cover everything from start to finish on how to start collecting Daemons, how to play Daemons, and some more interesting tactics about Daemons when you get to those higher top tables at your competitive events. If you've never been here before, we do 3 live streams a week and I also cover a whole bunch of different topics, mainly about Daemons as of late, as I am a bit of a Daemon specialist myself. But I did do some videos semi-recently about how to play Daemons in 40k. And today's video is going to encompass everything about Daemons from start to finish. Now before we jump in, please like, subscribe. It's free. You may always unsubscribe later on, and if you really enjoy the content that we produce here, then you may as well go over to our Patreon, have a look and see if you want anything from TTS events in our Discord to coaching services by yours truly if you want to play Daemons better, or if you just want to play 40k better. They're also available on YouTube as member tiers as well. And be sure to go check out my lovely partner Adela's commission painting services. If you want to have some beautiful Daemons like these ones as well, then definitely go get yourself something commission painted. With all of that said and done, let's jump right in and start with, how do you start collecting Daemons? So why do you want to play Daemons? Well, there's a lot of different benefits for playing Daemons overall. I mean, you can use them in Age of Sigmar, you can use them in 40k, there's 4 different divinations to choose from, and you can play any of those 4, or you can mix them all together. So really it's like playing 5 armies in one and over 2 game systems. There's a lot of different choices, plus you can also use them in other armies as well. Let's say you like playing Nurgle Daemons, well, why not play Death Guard as well and use your Nurgle Daemons with your Death Guard. Play with some beautiful models. It's not like we have a unit of 10 Marines that all have different war gear. So your friends have convinced you to play Chaos Daemons and now you're stuck. Which combat patrol, which start collecting do I actually get? How do I start collecting Daemons? Well, it's been some time since I actually started playing Daemons myself, but if I was starting again from scratch right now, I would definitely start with one of the start collecting boxes. Sometimes they're around, sometimes they're not. You can find them on other places like Facebook Marketplace or eBay or wherever else you can find your minis. Do some digging, start with the start collecting, and pick your favorite god of choice. After you've done one of these combat patrols, well then my recommendation would be, why not buy the unnamed greater demon for the one that you have chosen? Let's say you chose Nurgle, well then buy a great unclean one. If you chose Tzeentch, buy a Lord of Change. Once you have done that, paint them all up, and if you're really enjoying that, well then you can split off from 2 different pathways from here. You can actually go down the pathway of choosing the same god and just go down that. So for example, Tzeentch, you then buy Kairos Fateweaver, you buy a Changeling, you buy something like, I don't know, a Burning Chariot. But if you enjoy playing Daemons as a whole and something else tickles your fancy, then buy another start collecting and do the same thing. Buy the greater demon for that set. And soon, before you know it, you'll have all 4 start collectings, all 4 of the greater demons that are unnamed, and then you can move on to the named ones. Okay, so now we're going to get onto more of the rules of the game and how you play 40k with Daemons in general. So let's start with something that's going to be really easy to discuss, and that's the enhancements, because at the moment there is no Daemon Codex, which means we only have the base detachment from the index, and that means that we only have 4 enhancements. Now each of the 4 enhancements are basically 1 for each god. So there's a Slaanesh, a Tzeentch, a Khorne, and a Nurgle. And basically the only reason you would ever take any of these is if you're taking a greater demon that is unnamed of that divination. So if I took a Lord of Change, I would take the Everstave to make him an extra 6 inches of range and an extra 2 to his strength on all of his weapons. If I was taking a Bloodthirster, I might take Argath, King of Blades, and if I was taking a Great Unclean one, I definitely would be taking the Endless Gift. You can take these enhancements on things like Demon Princes and whatnot, but they're really priced to be able to be taking them on the greater demons, so they're not as worth on other models. Okay, so now we're going to get a little bit more complicated in terms of the rules of the game. So if you're a newer player, try and follow along, and if you're an experienced player, this video is going to get a little bit more complicated as we go on. So let's talk about our army rule, and that is called the Shadow of Chaos. And basically what the Shadow of Chaos this does is while we own at least half or more of the objectives in an area, and our deployment zone is always considered to be in shadow, we will get shadow in that area. Now there's a few ways to also get shadow in an area instead of holding those objectives, and that's by doing things by having greater demons nearby, because all greater demons give shadow to the demons that they match. So Nurgle to Nurgle, Khorne to Khorne, Be'lakor to everyone, and they always give shadow to enemy units as well within 6 of them. So what does being in shadow actually mean? It means that you get +1 to your battle shock tests, and if you pass a battle shock test, you heal D3 wounds, and if you are a battle line unit, you heal D3 models instead. That means for something like Plague Bearers who have 2 wounds, you actually heal D3 Plague Bearers, so up to 6 wounds, which is pretty good. And it means for enemy units, they are at -1 to their battle shock test, and if they fail, they take D3 mortal wounds, which can be quite important in terms of game, because not only do they take the mortal wounds, but they become battle shocked, which means they're OC 0, they cannot hold any objectives, they cannot do any actions, and they have to take desperate escape tests. In terms of our detachment rule, which is the only one that we have at the moment, basically it means that we can deep strike 6 inches away from enemy units while within shadow instead of 9 away. Now this is really good because it means that your deployment zone always has that additional level of threat, because if someone gets close, you can deep strike really close to it. You can also deep strike really close to your greater demons with the matching divination, and you can also deep strike in the midboard if you control it by having those 2 objectives or more captured in a normal game of 40k. So now we're going to talk a little bit more closely on stratagems. Every index in the game, every detachment has 6 stratagems to be learnt, to be mastered, etc, etc. If you're new to the game, then generally when you get to a table against your opponent, you kind of ask them what their 6 stratagems are. And a lot of them will be repeats of other stratagems from other armies, or for example in Marines, a lot of them will have Armor of Contempt to reduce AP by 1. Now demons are quite unique, and they have some really fun stratagems to play around with. So let's go through them one at a time, and I'll tell you briefly about them, and then I'll show you later on in the video how you can use these stratagems to great effect when playing your games of 40k. So first one is Demonic Invulnerability, and this means that you can re-roll your invulnerable saves of 1. Now don't get caught out, you can only use this in the shooting phase, you cannot use this in the fight phase, and it can only be used to re-roll your invulnerable saves. So let's say you have a Demon Prince that's in cover, and he has a 2-up armor, you can only save on your 4-up invulnerable save and re-roll the 1s if you're getting shot by a lot of weapons at one time. Now the next one up is our bread and butter. Now this is the Realm of Chaos, which means that you can actually lift 1 unit off the table at the end of your opponent's turn and then land them back on the table using Deep Strike in your next turn. Now the caveats for this is it's 1 unit outside of shadow or 2 units within shadow. Now this doesn't mean wholly within, it means touching shadow at all. So if you have a long string of models and only 1 of them was within shadow, then you can still lift the whole unit and another unit, because you can lift 2 within shadow, and then land them back on the table the next turn. But they must come back the next turn. The next one up is Denizens of the Warp. Now this is a 3-inch deep strike. Now this one's quite common amongst other armies in the game. For example, Grey Knight's another army that can deep strike all over the field. 3-inch deep strike is quite common. GSC also have it as well. And it basically means that you can land 3 away, but you cannot charge. This is quite a hard one to use for demons because we don't really have too many shooting units. You can use things like Lords of Change to deep strike 3 away and then shoot something behind a wall. It might be really good, but then if you don't kill everything, you kind of die in the next turn, and it can be quite a risky play. But you can use this in combination with some other things that I'll show you later for some pretty nasty results. We then have Warp Surge, which is one of your units can advance and charge for a single CP, which is really good considering that you use the stratagem in the charge phase. So basically you can move onto those objectives in your movement phase, you then get shadow, and in your charge phase, the unit that has now advanced can then charge for a single command point, which is really good. It means some units can actually get really fast. The threat alone is really, really nice. Last but not least, we have Draft of Terror. Now this one is +1 AP, and you can use this in the shooting phase or the fight phase, so potentially twice in the same battle round, which is really good. And basically it means you get +1 AP to either your shooting weapon or your melee weapons. And if the enemy unit is battle shocked, then you can re-roll all of your wound rolls, which is incredibly powerful. We're going to combine that later on with some other units so that we can potentially just annihilate some enemy units by using the Draft of Terror. And in most cases, you're not really going to use a stratagem unless the enemy unit is battle shocked. But in some cases, it can be quite good. That extra pip of AP can really get through some nasty targets. And the last one for today is Corrupt Real Space. Now this makes an objective sticky, is the colloquial term for it, which basically means that once you've held that objective, you can then leave and you can go and do whatever you want, and it will be yours until it's taken by your opponent. Now for 1 CP, this doesn't just sticky the objective, it also gives you a bubble of Shadow of Chaos 6 inches around that little coin marker as well. So it's quite a big area. It means that you can have units that sit within that shadow so that they can get easier deep strikes, +1 to their battle shock, and maybe heal themselves as well. Or maybe you just want to sticky your home objective and then run away from it so you can then get into the action with all of your units. Okay, so now let's get into some specifics on some do's and don'ts for each one. This is a bit more complicated, so if you're newer to the game, maybe skip over this part and move over to the next part. But if you want to learn some real tips and tricks for stratagem use, let's take a quick look. So Demonic Invulnerability allows you to do those re-rolls. Now you can only use this in the shooting phase, and in my advice, only use this if you're going to be shot with a lot of shots. We're talking 20+ shots or more. It's not actually worth it to use rerolling saves of 1 against something that has like 1, maybe 2 or 3 shots that has a lot of damage. Instead, you just roll your 4-ups normally, and then you can use a CP reroll to try and get your 4-ups, because you're more likely to roll a 1, 2, or 3 than you are a bunch of 1s. Now, I'm not saying it won't happen. It's definitely happened to me, but you kind of want to save your reroll saves of 1 for rare cases that you can use it against lots of shots, and with something with a 4+ invulnerable save. Definitely do not use this on something that has a 5-up invulnerable or a 6-up invulnerable, because the odds of your survival are already slim and you'd just be wasting a command point. It's a bit of a trap. Now, Realm of Chaos is a bit of a threat stratagem. You always want to have the ability to use it so that your opponent knows they cannot commit to your army. So for example, let's say they have a big line of their units and they want to press into you, but you can have that CP in your pocket, knowing that you can then up those 2 units at the end of their turn and place them into your enemy's backline. They are going to be a little less likely to leave their backline exposed if you keep that stratagem available. If you don't have any CP left and you burn it, then your opponent is more likely to make all their charge rolls and then just get stuck in because they know you actually can't use it anymore. You also don't want to up anything that has taken a lot of damage in terms of using it for a scoring unit in your opponent's deployment zone. Let's say you have a unit of 5 flesh hounds and there's 2 left and you want to lift them off the board. Well, when they come back, they're going to have to take a battle shock test, and if you land them in your opponent's deployment zone expecting to do an action, something like establish locus, well then they're going to have to take a battle shock test of 7, and if they fail, you just spent a stratagem for absolutely nothing. And lastly, you always kind of want to have the ability to up those units so that you can look at what cards you might draw. If you've already drawn behind enemy lines, established locus, etc., you don't want to have units that go to your opponent's deployment zone, but if you have them available to you and you know that you are likely to draw those cards in the next turn, look at the ones that you may draw and see if it's worth it. Do I want to pay the 1 CP to have 2 units fly across the table and do some actions? Is it going to be worth it? Now, you don't have to use this stratagem just for secondaries as well. You can use it to jump your greater demons around the board and put them in different safety areas as well, behind terrain, and getting things closer so you can land, for example, a greater demon and string out another unit to that greater demon to make a charge. It's actually really useful. So always save that 1 CP so that you can have it in your pocket at the end of the turn. Now, Denizens of the Warp. This also has massive threat potential. You will find more often than not against better opponents, they will be screening their entire backfield, knowing that you could potentially deep strike 3 inches away to either do an action or maybe even land a greater demon and then another demon closer to that so you can make your easy charges. For example, something like Scarbrand, he doesn't always need to make combat. More often than not, you can actually deep strike him 3 away and have your units that are going to deal the damage drop, charge, kill, and then in the next turn, you've still got Scarbrand available. Warp Surge. Now this is a really good trading mechanic. You actually don't need to burn this stratagem in your command phase. You can wait until your charge phase in case your opponent has anything like reactive moves, or you shoot them to death, or something else happens out of your control where you don't actually want to spend the stratagem anymore, so you just keep the CP. You can actually take 2 objectives in your movement phase, you then get Shadow for the charge phase, and you can really rocket ship missile a unit into their lines to deal some damage and make a good trade. For example, a unit of Fiends is really good at doing this. They move 12, they move through the terrain because they're beasts as well. Take the point with the Fiends, hold 1 other objective, so you now hold 2 in no man's land, then you can pay your CP and charge with the Fiends, plus you get a nice screen in no man's land and it will stop them from holding that objective. So it's a worthy trade for you. Draft of Terror. Now this has some insane potential. If you can manage to battle shock your opponent, then you can really make good use of this stratagem. For example, a Lord of Change's shooting now becomes AP3 and AP2 and has all those rerolls, or in the fight phase, you can use it to great effect with something like Fiends, Screamers, Bloodletters, anything that hits really hard in melee. Even your greater demons can have full rerolls to wound. They can't use any stratagems as well because they're battle shocked. They can't even fight on death or anything like that. It's insanely powerful. There are a lot of units in your army that can force battle shock tests, for example, Skull Cannons, Bile Pipers, and Change Casters, but they are a little bit hard to use. I do highly recommend running a Skull Cannon so you can then battle shock your opponent, and there's lots of ways that you can also modify the rolls, for example with Blue Horrors, with Poxbringers, or just with Shadow of Chaos, and you can really get them down to like Leadership 9 and then make them take that battle shock test, and in Shadow they're going to take the mortal wounds, then there's no stratagem use, you charge them in, you use Draft of Terror, and that unit is definitely going bye-bye. Now, Corrupt Real Space has some rather unique strategy around it, and I'll show you this later on in the video with some really unique tactics. But in general, you kind of want to use this against slower armies that don't have any way to deep strike into your back line or to fly over you and take your objectives, and then you can make use of all of your units by sticking that objective and then moving forward to try and kill everything to the maximum potential that you can. It's also really useful for deep striking your units close by. Let's say your opponent has taken 2 out of the 3 objectives in their turn for no man's land and you only hold that 1 objective. Well, if you've managed to bait one of their expensive units over to your 1 objective, I don't know, like a Rogel Dawn tank, well then you can pay a CP to sticky your objective even though you already hold it, but it will give you Shadow, which means you can deep strike something like a Bloodthirster 6 inches away from the Rogel Dawn and then charge it in anyway because you are landing within that Shadow. So let's now talk about list creation. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to make your own list in the sense that I don't want to give you a list that I run because everyone has their own ideas, and I'm sure you are a smart enough cookie to figure out exactly what you want to run. There's lots of different combos that you can play around with, and everything has its own special rules. I'm not going to go through all of that today. It'd take forever. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the pitfalls in creating a demon list and some of the things that you want to include. So when I write a demon list, the number one thing that I consider for today's game is that we give up a lot for Bring It Down and Assassinate. And I've spoken about this in length before. Basically, our graded demons are monsters and characters, which means that because a lot of them have 20 wounds, they're going to give up 6 points for Bring It Down and 4 points for Assassinate, and 10 points total for killing a graded demon is a lot of points to give your opponent. So really, you want to stay away from being able to give them those Bring It Down and Assassinate points, and they're not going to take those, they're not going to take a fixed secondary if you don't give up the maximum amount. Now, a lot of people like to play graded demon spam, and that's one of the common list archetypes that you see with demons. The reason for this is because they have so much toughness, so many wounds to get through, that often you just end up killing your opponent anyway. And now this is a really good list archetype to run if you're going to play some casual games and you just want to curb stomp some poor noobs. But if you're getting into those higher tiered events, and you're playing some more competitive games, then playing with full graded demon spam is not really going to work, and you're just going to kind of get tabled most of your games and give up a lot of points. Now, I did figure out that the sweet spot for this is about 17 for Bring It Down, and you can take as many characters as you want. If you have 16 points for Bring It Down, no one's going to take Fixed against you. If you have 18 for Bring It Down, everyone's going to take Fixed against you. So that means that in a list, you might want to take, for example, 2 graded demons that have 20 wounds, and then 1 graded demon that doesn't have 20 wounds, and that's 16 points. You could also do 2 graded demons with 20 wounds and like 2 soul grinders, for example, and that'd still only give up 16 for Bring It Down. Now, I'm not really going to talk about allies for today. I know that you can also ally things like Chaos Knights with your brigands and carnivores and whatnot, and that's for another time in another video. This is pure demons today, no allies, because that's cheating. So let's talk about some of the archetypes that you might see. Well, graded demon spam is one of them. Another one could be pure Khorne, which is quite common at the moment, with a bunch of Ren Masters, Bloodthirsters, and Bloodletters to just kind of annihilate your opponent as quick as possible. It is a really good list, and it often does work really well, but in those games where you come up against someone that has loads of screening units and loads of firepower, they will get through you no matter what. Another archetype that you may see is Infiltrator Nurgle spam, where you just take lots and lots of Nurglings and Blue Horrors and things like that to kind of infiltrate into the midboard, and then you can stat check your opponent with massive toughness models and just try and outscore them by maybe even doing fixed secondaries or just getting so many points that your opponent cannot come back from it. Now, my favorite archetype to play with is Toolbox, is the way I like to call it, and I think that this is the one that demons do best. And what I mean by that is that the number one thing that demons have going for them is that they get to choose their engagement. So they get to choose where and when and with what units they are going to be fighting, because you can sit in deep strike, you can pull your units from other parts of the table, and generally you get to decide which of your units fight which enemy units. You may hear this and go, okay, well, this sounds really OP, but that's because demons don't really have a lot going for them in terms of rerolls, -1 damage, fight first, reactive moves. They're kind of very stale when it comes to all of the individual little tips and tricks that you can use. But what you can do is you can go, well, I need that unit over there to die, and they only have 1 wound, but I need a lot of attacks. Maybe I'll throw Demonettes or Fleshhounds into them. Or perhaps I need to kill a unit of Marines. Well, now I'm going to throw something like Bloodletters, Blood Crushers, or Fiends, or even Screamers into them, because you have 2 damage attacks. It requires a lot of practice and patience in getting used to what enemy units your opponent can run so that you can figure out which of your units you really want to hit them with. And this is why it's called a toolbox, because really you have the best tool for the job in every scenario if you build your list correctly, but it's all about getting them to the right location. So if you want to build a toolbox list, my advice to you would be maybe pick 2 graded demons that you're going to be using to drop off your units, and then have some hammer units, something like a big blob that's going to land, charge, deal a ton of damage, and then take a little while for your opponent to kill, so that the rest of your army can then survive, scoring with like really fast moving scoring units, and smaller units for doing actions that you can land in their deployment zone and things like that. And while they're dealing with those hammer units, then you can play the action game. Now, ideally I say 2 graded demons, because that stays really nicely under the Bring It Down umbrella of not giving up too many points, and you can have those 2 graded demons to support most of your army with their massive utility by giving out shadow to both you and to enemy units. An army that I've been running a lot recently is, for example, Skarbrand and then Kairos. And Kairos is my utility piece that sits a little bit further back, and he makes it so that I can indirectly fire onto enemy units. And then I also still have Skarbrand, who can then charge and lead headstrong into the fray by delivering my hammer units to the front line. Let's just talk a little bit more about those hammer units, some of those bomb units. So what do I mean when I say bomb? Well, I mean a unit that's going to land and can receive a lot of buffs from your army and then crush your opponent into dust before immediately dying in the next turn. That's generally how this army operates. You kind of want to have most of your units off the table or laying behind a building ready to strike, and then you can rush out, charge into a unit, kill them, and trade your life for a better score in the end of the game. So here's a small little example battlefield where I can show you some more unique tactics that you can use in your games with demons. The first one I'm going to show you is how you string out with your demons when you're using the corrupt real space stratagem to sticky an objective. So what I would suggest, instead of putting your whole unit on the objective, why not put one singular model, then string the rest back into cover. This way, your opponent, if you sticky your objective, has to come and take it from you, because what you'll do is you'll just kill off these guys, and then the rest are actually going to be okay in terms of shooting. Nothing can shoot them anymore, and you still keep your objective for sticky, and then this unit can then run forward and then go and kill something. So for this next example, it turns out that your friend doesn't like to have fun, and they play Space Marines. Also, don't mind the spooky terrain, by the way. It's Spooktober in terms of filming this. But anyway, for this next example, what do we do if they've strung out 9 inches in the back corner and you can't get within 9 inches over here with any of your super scary units? Well, here they are. Well, there you go. You can do your 3-inch deep strike with your Lord of Change, because he can now be within 9 inches of these guys, and then you can land another unit that is also Zench within range of your greater demon, and now they can be 6 away, and you can either land flamers to shoot something, you could land Scarbrand here and charge with some bloodletters, and voila, a pocket where there was none has now become a pocket thanks to Denizens of the Warp for a 3-inch deep strike. In this next example, let's just pretend that you have shadow in this area and your enemy wants to try and make a charge onto one of your units, and you can't really do much about it, but you do know that you have shadow in this area. So what are we going to do? Bam! There he is, 6 inches away, rapid ingress. And yes, you can rapid ingress 6 inches away if you do hold shadow, because it's just a normal deep strike. And now, all of a sudden, if these guys want to make a charge onto your Fleshhounds, well, Scarbrand has an extra CP left, and he might heroically intervene into this unit because they have to make base contact, and this unit is going to have a terrible time. In this example, we're going to show you how you can use Fiends, for example, or maybe Fleshhounds, or even Screamers as a rocket missile. So I did mention, for example, if you hold an objective in no man's land, and you don't hold this objective in no man's land, well then what we do is we advance these Fiends. Now all of a sudden, these Fiends are way up in the midboard, and look at that, they hold this objective, and they hold that objective with your Plague Bearers over there. So all of a sudden, in the charge phase, you are going to get shadow, which means that this unit can now pay a CP to Warp Surge, and they can absolutely advance and charge further away into an enemy unit. You actually don't need to spend the CP earlier on until you know you have now held 2 objectives. Another fun tactic that you may enjoy is running 9 Nurglings with your Great Unclean One, because the Nurglings get the 6-up Feel No Pain, meaning they have a 6-up Invuln and a 6-up Feel No Pain, and they always benefit from being within shadow of your Great Unclean One. So let's say randomly, oh no, we've been shot, we lose 6 of our Nurglings, we only have 3 left. But because I'm a battle line unit, if I pass my battle shock, leadership +1 thanks to this little guy, then you can heal D3 bases, meaning you get 12 wounds back, and that is a really, really annoying tar pit. Another really fun unit to mess around with is these Screamers. Now I know mine are on the wrong size bases, please don't at me about that. GW just hasn't caught up to the current state of the rules made by myself. Thanks GW, change the base sizes please, thank you. But this is a very fun unit to play around with, because this unit has a once per game uppy downy, just like the stratagem, though the only difference is with these guys, they actually don't need to come back in straight away. So what you can do is you can leave them in your corner at the beginning of the game, up them into the air straight away, and then just stay in deep strike as a rapid ingress threat. say, oh no, you're versing that guy that no one likes to play against that has infiltrators, ew, yuck, but how are we gonna deep strike within 12 of them? We can't, we also can't shoot them, but what if we wrap an ingress in their corner, somewhere that they can't shoot us, and then we move 14 inches, we mortal wound these guys to absolute hell, and then we charge them and other units on top of that, and this unit has just become a 27 wound brick of 4-up and vulnerable saves that cleared the screens for you. Now the last little tactic that I want to show you is this Scrivener bomb. Now a lot of people have come across this handy dandy little tactic, and I quite like it as well. I do think that the Poxspringer is a better choice, but if you want to do some real sneaky shenanigans, what you do is you make the Scrivener your warlord, and at the end of the game, you take the secret mission command insertion to then 3-inch deep strike this massive unit of plague bearers that all have +1 OC, so your unit has an OC of 32, and you put them on the enemy's home objective as your warlord, stealing it from them so you can get your 20 points. Another thing that this unit can do is also string out between all the objectives with 3 OC each, stealing all the objectives at the end of the game for primary. They're a really fun unit to keep in your backfield and then uppy downy them later for some spooky shenanigans. If you've watched all the way through, thank you very much for watching. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Please do that down below, it's entirely free. And if you really enjoy the content and you want to learn more about Daemons or just how to play 40k in general, please go check out our coaching services. We offer coaching services over on Patreon, and they're also available here on YouTube under the memberships tab as well. Also consider joining our Discord. It's in the links in the description and it's entirely free to join. You just get a lot more rewards if you are a patron as well. We also offer TTS events in our Discord, which happen monthly. So go down there if you want to play some games of Daemons, and you can also play against me. I also play in those TTS events as well. And otherwise, go check out my lovely partner Adela's commission painting services. If you want to get any of these beautiful models for yourself, then definitely go check out the commission painting services. She's done a lovely job with my Lords of Change. With all of that said and done, if I didn't cover anything in today's video and you think that there might be something more that I can talk about, or if you have any video ideas in terms of Daemon content or maybe even non-Daemon content that you want to see added in future, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know what you think of all of my tips and tricks from today. And if you have anything else to add, it's a lovely place down there for me to reply to every single one of you. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Peace out. Bye.